I think you can absolutely make that charge. Dave Chappelle, who's sort of reliably outspoken, um, he spoke out against the curtailing of freedom of speech on stage in Riyadh, but he was talking actually about American curtailing of freedom of speech rather than the Saudi one.
Now, it's the final day of the Riyadh Comedy Festival, which has seen a lineup of some of the best, mostly male, comedians from the UK and America. Jimmy Carr, Jack Whitehall and Kevin Hart were just some of the names to make an appearance. They were offered huge sums of money to perform in front of Saudi citizens as part of that country's effort to boost its cultural scene. But participants have come under heavy criticism for doing so, with many questioning why anyone would choose to perform in the sort of nation that executed more than 300 people last year. Well, the comedy critic for The Times and the Sunday Times, Dominic Maxwell, has been looking at this for The Times and joins me now. Hello, Dominic.
Hello, Hugo.
Thanks very much for being with us. Look, this is the first festival of its kind organised by Saudi Arabia. It ends today. Do we know much about how it's gone? What kind of reception these comedians have received?
I can't claim to have an on-the-ground response. Mostly what I've heard is from the comics, and as you'd imagine, they are bigging it up. I'm not saying they're wrong, but they've come back with positive responses, and some of them who weren't speaking to anyone before the festival began have come up with defences of why it wasn't just about a big payday and why it was a good thing to have done.
Do we know who they were performing to? Was it just Saudi citizens?
I believe it was mostly Saudi citizens, yeah.
Right, okay. You'll have a better line into this than I do. But I've heard an awful lot of comedians talking about this over the last couple of weeks, and not really very many other people. The comedy world is in some uproar about this, is it not?
It certainly is, and there's some people. Look, their job is to express themselves well, and so people from both sides have expressed themselves very well. David Cross, who you may know from Arrested Development, various films, he was very scabrous and very amusing and very angry and very good about saying why everyone who did this was a horrible, awful sellout, and shouldn't be let back into the tent again. And then just recently, Omar Jalili has written a piece in The Guardian, and he makes the case that really it isn't about the money. Of course, everyone's getting paid, and that's a given. But it's about, one of the big defenses comics make is that Jim Jeffries put it something like, we are freedom of speech engines being sent in there. And one of the big defenses is, yes, of course, it's not a good regime. It's all sorts of compromise involved in this. But if we can sneak a few good ideas through, that's got to be better than not having any kind of contact, hasn't it?
Well, so they do seem to have been somewhat curtailed in what they can and can't make jokes about. Some comedians have come out publicly to say they chose to reject an offer to take part. One of them, Atsuko Okusuka, she posted her contract online, revealing various censorship requirements. Comedian Nish Kumar, who I don't believe was invited, but he's criticised those taking part in his on his podcast Pod Save the UK.
You aren't going there just to entertain the people of Saudi Arabia. You're going there to participate in a state-sponsored event. The comedian Atsuko Okusuka actually revealed some of the censorship rules that are in place in the contract that you sign in order to perform at this. Artists should not prepare or perform any material that may be considered to degrade, defame, or bring into public disrepute, contempt, scandal, embarrassment, or ridicule. A, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, including its leadership, public figures, cultural people. B, the Saudi royal family, legal system, or government. And C, any religion, religious tradition, religious figure, or religious practice. Yeah, there's been so much spurious, nonsensical talk about the dangers posed to comedians' line of work by freedom of expression.
So, Dominic, one could say that comedians in the UK maybe have it a bit easy, but in the United States, Jimmy Kimmel was recently suspended for voicing his opinion on Charlie Kirk's assassination, and people are, the sort of the continued right to free speech is much discussed in America. In an American context, does it not seem a bit hypocritical that many of these American comedians would perform in a country where free speech is absolutely not on the agenda?
I think you can absolutely make that charge. Dave Chappelle, who's sort of reliably outspoken, he spoke out against the curtailing of freedom of speech on stage in Riyadh, but he was talking actually about American curtailing of freedom of speech rather than the Saudi one.
That does seem quite convenient. Look, some comedians who accepted the opportunity have challenged the criticism. We've got a clip also from Aziz Ansari, from Parks and Recreation and other things, talking to Jimmy Kimmel about that this week.
I have an aunt that lived there for a while, and I talked to her about this, and she said there's people over there that don't agree with the stuff that the government's doing, and to ascribe like the worst behavior of the government onto those people is not fair. Just like there's people in America that don't agree with the things the government is
yes.
doing.
I mean, the government over there is arresting people for peaceful protest. I mean, I know, we're doing horrible things over here, but hey, they murdered a journalist. I mean, it's like, these are not good people over there.
Dominic, is this going to last in the comedy world as a sort of a division and things that people are judged for? Are people going to think of it forever, like the people who've performed there, like Jimmy Carr, for example, being like sort of, Queen playing Sun City in apartheid South Africa?
Very good.
Is this going to be remembered, do you think?
Look, I don't know. B, I think people do have arguments. I don't know. I'm torn. It's a very good case against. I understand entirely Omar Jalili's argument that yes, you be on your high horse and absolutely in your rights to boycott it. Is it not better to get some words through? If people like that, who I think make a case for themselves, I don't think people might disagree with someone like Omar Jalili, but I don't think they're going to sort of put them in disgrace. Whether Jimmy Carr would want to engage in that kind of conversation, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just, performing in a place where you are limited by the government from saying what you want to say and are also being paid a huge amount in order to take part in that dynamic. I don't know. I can sort of see it following people around a bit for a while, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, whether the sums are as great as they've been reported. I sound like I'm making excuses for Riyadh here. I'm not. But what I do know is that things like the fees involved, which are supposedly as big as £1.2 million for presumably someone like Chappelle, have not been confirmed. People don't talk about money on the whole. So I think I'm coming to you from having been very, very firmly, this is obviously a bad thing. Yeah. And then just seeing a couple of contrary opinions, Aziz Ansari included, and thinking, okay, I see the point.
Well, look, if anyone would like to see whether or not I would perform in Saudi Arabia for £1 million, why don't they get the Saudis to offer me £1 million and we can find out. Dominic Maxwell, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you with us. Dominic is, of course, the comedy critic for The Times and The Sunday